Hello and welcome to this overview of the beer making process. Beer is older than the pyramids, and in this time we as a species have refined the production process into an art. This video begins to pull apart that production process by going over each step that you will need to brew your own beer, if beginning from raw ingredients. This is distinct from the method used if you were given a small tin with yeast taped under the lid. The beer you pour from a bottle is the last step in a long line of steps that turn raw barley, malt and hops into something that can taste delicious, or like someone put piss in a bottle. To get started, let's look at what you need. The equipment needed for this includes the following: some sort of mill, or if you have access to a reliable and consistent source, pre-milled grains. A suitably large vessel that will hold both boiling water and your grain. You will need a large funnel, a wire screen or filter, a large fermenter with airlock and rubber plug, a series of bottles that are pressure rated. Once you have all of the necessary equipment, the first step isn't actually brewing at all. The thing you'll need to do is thoroughly clean and sanitize your equipment. This is important, as everything downstream from here will be contaminated if you take any shortcuts or choose to overlook it. If you are a Puritan or have access to a large supply of grain for a low cost, you can begin milling your own. This process creates something called grist. This is where the three main types of beer brewing come from, extract brewing being the first and perhaps most common. Extract brewing uses extracts from the grain. This can be as a powder or liquid, and forms your beer. The next step, which is often used by small brewers, is called partial mash brewing, also known as mini mash, and it involves the use of malt extract and grain. Finally, there is what is arguably the most pure form of brewing, which is called all grain brewing. It does come with a number of caveats, particularly a higher investment up front of equipment and space. This is normally only done by those who have more advanced knowledge of the process. After you have your grains prepared in an appropriate manner or have sourced extract, you begin the mash conversion. Mashing takes all of the saccharides in your grain and makes them into useful sugars through heating and hydrolysis. They are effectively steeped in hot water, not boiling water, as boiling will undo what you want, and they remain in this heated state for an hour. Then comes lautering, which siphons off the liquid from the remnant grains. This liquid is called wort, and will be the basis of all beer and whiskey production from here on. The wort is boiled for an hour or thereabouts, while you add in other compounds, hops being one in particular. The wort is boiled for several reasons. One is to create a sterile environment. The second is to stop any enzyme activity that could cause off flavors or problems down the track. This is done in something called a kettle. A byproduct of boiling your wort in the kettle is that it lowers the pH and, in theory, stabilizes your wort, which prevents flavor changes down the track. After this wort is cooled and has separated out any residual compounds in it, these could be what cause haze in your beer, it's cooled in an apparatus called a plate cooler, or at least in large industrial processes it is. When learning how to brew at home, you are more likely to start with something like an ice bath. Now that you have added everything to your wort that you are going to, and taken out everything that you are going to, except yeast, you take your first gravity measurement. This is your specific gravity, which is done with a hydrometer. This first reading is very important and should not be skipped. It will tell you whether or not the next stage of fermentation has occurred successfully. This is done by adding yeast. This can be done several ways. The process of fermentation can take a couple of weeks to several months, depending on what you are trying to brew. In the case of an ale, it could be weeks. In the case of a lager, it could be months. The first stage is called primary fermentation. This allows yeast to convert any of the saccharides that are present into ethanol and carbon dioxide. It will also lead to the yeast flocculating and sinking to the bottom of the fermenter, taking with it any particles that are still in suspension. Some brewers and breweries use a secondary fermentation after this. This carries risks and benefits. The benefits are that it can help to clarify the beer, creating a more polished and refined finish. Done poorly, it has the negative effects of possibly introducing infection into your fermentation. This means you can wind up with something that needs to be thrown out. After all of these fermentations are done, you need to take your second gravity reading. This is also known as your final gravity reading. When you take the first gravity reading, your last gravity reading, and plug them into the right formula, you will be able to figure out how much alcohol is in your beer. This produces what is known as a green beer, and it needs to be matured to allow for development of flavor. After up to 4 weeks, this maturation is finished. The beer can be filtered, bottled, and carbonated. After the 2-week carbonation period, you can leave your beer to be racked for another 3 to 4 weeks. This cellaring process helps to refine the beer and take away some of the rough edges. After all of this, your beer is ready to be shipped or consumed as you want. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it helpful or interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.